and welcome back to the Legends of Tomorrow After Show right here on thestream.tv. I'm your host, Jamie Philbrook, and we got a great show to talk about tonight. But before we begin, I want to remind you that you can communicate with us during the show. Please go to Twitter, use the hashtag LegendsAS, or right here on the YouTube channel that you're watching, you can just put a comment in the comment section. We're going to be checking in during the show. We'd love to hear what you think about what we're talking about. But before we begin, let me introduce my Wave Rider crew, as always, Patrick Campbell.
What's going on, guys? It's great to be back. What an exciting episode. I can't wait to talk about it.
Absolutely, and then to my right, Alvin Rueda.
What's going on? Glad to be back here. I was at the edge of my seat all throughout this episode, and I definitely can't wait to discuss because this thing was awesome. I'm ready.
It's a great episode. We got a really good episode to talk about tonight, and especially the fact that this is the third to last episode. So only 2 episodes of Legends Season 2 left after this episode this season, and so you know we're really getting to the nitty-gritty. We're getting to the bottom of the season, and it's a lot of fun. So this was Season 2, Episode 16, Fellowship of the Spear, and let's talk about the first kind of cool thing that happened tonight, which was a return to the vanishing point. Our team of legends, led by Rip, realized Rip used the part of his brain that had been evil, and he still had those memories, so he knows that the Legion of Doom's headquarters and the final piece of the spear are in the vanishing point. So I'll start with you, Alvin. What do we... Stop! My goodness, start with you. I got Alvin on the break.
It's all right.
Patrick Campbell, what do we think
about
the vanishing point?
I was really glad that we went back to the vanishing point because the vanishing point signifies a very important moment in time for our characters, especially Rory, of all characters, because that is when we saw Captain Cold, his partner in crime, die.
Absolutely, and we actually, when we get to the vanishing point and when Mick Rory is there, he starts to have a little bit of a flashback, and we kind of see a couple of the shots from Season 1 of when Snart sacrificed himself for the team at the vanishing point. I think a little foreshadowing for things that are going to happen later in the episode, but I thought that was a cool moment. The real Alvin Rueda, what did you think?
Alvin, please. I'm going to sit down.
I'll just call you Patrick, and I'm going to call you Alvin from now on. Go ahead.
I thought, why would you go back to the vanishing point? There's so much emotions going there. Well, I get why they went back there, obviously, to retain that last piece of the spear.
Get the final piece of the spear, yeah.
So there's a lot of emotions going on in there, and Mick's starting to see Captain Cold again, or was he seeing him, or was he real? We'll get to that in a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But
I think we assume at this point in the beginning, when they're at the vanishing point, we've seen this season Mick sort of talking to the ghost of Snart. So I think we assume this is sort of still in his head at this point.
Right. Like I said, there was a lot of emotions going on there. There's a lot that happened, especially from Season 1, and they finally came. Well, this was the first time they went back there since Season 1, right?
First time that we've been back since they destroyed the Time Masters and left the vanishing point.
I was going to say, we haven't been back there, and it was a very dangerous place for all of them to go back to. I mean, not just as a place in time, because it's outside of time. That's what makes it such a dangerous place to begin with. But the emotions that it brings to all of them, because it was very traumatic for them.
And what a cool hiding place for the Legion of Doom to have that be the reveal that this was their headquarters. I thought that was really cool.
And that was awesome. That was way genius of the Legion of Doom. Whoever thought of it, probably Reverse Flash. It was great to bring them in there because they wouldn't think in the first place for the Legion of Doom to have their secret lair over there. And it's awesome. Like, out of all the secret lairs you could possibly have in Legends, the vanishing point is definitely the place to be.
Well, and we know the Legion of Doom, obviously very famous for the hovering skull, sort of Darth Vader helmet headquarters they had on the Super Friends cartoon. So I did feel like using vanishing point the way it is now after last season, I got a little bit of that Legion of Doom Super Friends feel. Did you pick up on that too?
I definitely did. On top of that, vanishing point sounds like the perfect place to have a villain's lair. Come on, like really, the vanishing point, because that's where heroes go to vanish and die.
You get the chills just when you saw the Legends walk in there in that exterior shot. It looked amazing.
Well, and as you said, there's so much emotionally connecting them, and especially Rip, to that place, and Mick, obviously, to that place, that you really felt all those emotions come up with our characters through our actors when we've seen the scene. The other thing to mention to your point, when we're talking about Thawne, I thought it was really cool that, like, the Legends outsmarted Thawne. Like he was surprised that they figured it out and were able to get the final piece of the spear from him, basically. And I thought that was really cool that, we saw Thawne kind of yell, "Damn you!"
He did.
What did you think about that?
Well, he's angry. He worked his butt off to get that piece of the spear, and that last piece of spear is missing now, and now the legend has everything else to form the final pieces of the spear. So of course you're gonna be mad. Everything you worked for, especially with Black Flash just chasing him around. You know how hard it is to.
Right. The Time Reverend of Thawne kind of keeping away from Zoom. So, but it's cool though. There's a lot of intelligence going on in the Legion of Doom, so of course they got to go from Plan A to Plan B, and I know we're going to get to that later. Well, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Just one other cool thing happened in Vanishing Point I want to make sure we talk about. I know you and I are both big Firestorm fans, and I think this is really the second time we've seen Firestorm transmutate, which is one of his powers from the comic books.
I think it's at least
maybe the
second,
third, at least the second. I know
Second.
the big one was in Invasion when he turned the Dominator's bomb into water. In this episode, they're trying to find where the spear, the final piece of the spear, is hidden at the Vanishing Point, and there's sort of this like statue kind of thing, or I don't even know what it is.
Almost like a mausoleum.
Like a mausoleum,
I mean,
basically.
that's what it seemed like.
Basically, Jax transmutated it into jelly beans, which I thought was great. And it was cool to see that.
Beans.
Yeah.
Like I was laughing so hard because I love jelly beans. So my first thought was, Jax, you magnificent man, you made jelly beans, and then they left them there. What is he thinking?
No. I think it was a cool way to sort of interpret different aspects of Firestorm's powers, which we don't always get to see.
No.
Well, Rip did take a bite, or he took
Yes,
one
he did.
jelly
Took
bean
one of the jelly
and ate
beans.
one.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Probably licorice, knowing Rip, but
Who knows?
not that it made sense or anything. But that was cool to finally see that. As you were talking before, I think we were talking about it while we were watching the episode. It's like, when was the last time he actually did that or manipulated something, informing something? And you mentioned it was during the Invasion episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was cool to do, and I hope he does more of that. Firestorm needs to do more of these things and really use his power correctly.
Flames. Yeah, because those are his powers.
Because he's so powerful. He can manipulate
him
a lot of objects into anything. And for him to just do that, it just seems like he has this limitless power that he can just conquer throughout.
Well, I grew up on the Super Friends cartoon, which Firestorm was introduced in.
Right.
And not originally introduced, obviously they brought him from the comic books, but it was introduced in the 80s cartoon. And, I always saw him as sort of rivaling Green Lantern in the sense that Green Lantern can create pretty much anything he can think of from his ring. Firestorm can pretty much create anything he wants. He can transmutate anything, any object into any other object. So I've always thought that was a really cool power, and I love that they're finally getting to use it on the show.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that too. I just hope that we see more of that because we continue to set up that, hey, he can do all these really cool things, but why aren't we doing more of it?
Yeah.
Which is not, and that's not a dig at the show. I love this show. Obviously, I love this show.
Right.
But I just want to see more because I like the character and I know that he can do cool things, so I'd like to see more.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about, though. If he does that too many times, he'll just be way more powerful.
Right. No, that's a good point. I mean, it's almost the Superman complex. You don't want him to use all the powers he has all the time because there's no problems to solve then because he can just solve anything. So the second cool thing that really happened this episode was our team gets the spear, and now we got to figure out how to destroy it. And the only way to destroy it is to use the blood of Christ. So, of course, the team says, let's go back to the birth of Jesus and get the blood of Christ. And Rip explains that that's the one point in time that you can never travel to, because if you happen to make a mistake, everything falls apart, which I thought was a pretty good explanation of why the show itself doesn't want to go there. But so they end up going to World War I to get Tolkien, of course, who wrote the Lord of the Rings books and the Hobbit novels. And Tolkien had written a thesis that Nate read in his history books, and this thesis basically saying that there's a knight buried in France that has the blood of Christ. So what do we think about that? We've already seen George Lucas on the show this season. We've seen a lot of sort of real-life historical people, George Washington. what did you think of Tolkien? Or as they call him in the show, Tolkien.
Tolkien.
I've never heard that pronunciation before.
No, and you and I both talked about that. I'd never heard them say Tolkien before. I thought that was
And
very
that's all
interesting.
they said was Tolkien.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
all
because
Tolkien.
I'm used to calling him Tolkien, and
Right.
so clearly we're wrong, or I'm going to
Or
assume
they're using a
we've
new
been wrong.
interpretation. Yeah,
but
probably.
you know that's okay. But the one thing we've talked about all season, at least I know for me, the thing I've liked is using real life figures and events, because I feel like that's when Legends is at its strongest, because we're playing with things that we know, and to use things like that, to use things like George Lucas and his influence with Star Wars last week, the Apollo 13 incident, it makes sense and it makes the episode stronger. And I thought that, as someone who loves Lord of the Rings, I know you like Lord of the Rings, I know you do too, Alvin, it was so cool to have all the Lord of the Rings references in this. And I mean,
look,
worked.
obviously, Fellowship of the Spear, that's the title
absolutely.
of the episode. Yeah, no, like you said, there's lots of sort of Fellowship of the Ring and Lord of the Rings like references in here.
Well, and it's perfect for this show because as a group, they are their own version of the Fellowship who are trying to save the Spear of Destiny right now. So it really has been fitting for this season.
Yeah,
It made
no,
sense to
I
me.
agree with you. I think he was the perfect historical character to fit into this. I mean, it felt a little bit like going to the well a second time after George Lucas, because there is a lot of similarity. You know, both the creators of this great mythology that these characters grew up on. But I thought he was a great character. The actor that played him did a really good job, and I thought it was really, really good use of the character.
A little difference between the George Lucas, though, because Tolkien, the late great Tolkien.
Tolkien, yes.
To me, he was Mr. Personality, or Mr. Lack of Personality, rather, but more of kind of a guide, kind of like Lord of the Rings. So that's pretty much what he was. He was a guide, and that's where they adapted the Lord of the Rings and him as his responsibility in the show. And I thought that made complete sense. Just like in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, they all have a quest, right? So
this was a very questy episode.
it was super questy,
totally.
yeah. And Tolkien was that quest. He was that like kind of heart in this little guide that they're going in, especially with the blood of Jesus Christ.
I just want to make a comment. I'm looking at the comment section right now to Chris Kittendy's. I actually was thinking of the Da Vinci Code and Dan Brown earlier while we were watching it, because I actually didn't know we were doing the Tolkien episode. And so when they started talking about this,
please, Patrick.
I'm sorry.
Let's get it right.
I'm sorry. But when we were watching it, I actually didn't know that's what we were doing with this episode. And when he starts talking about this great writer, I thought of the Da Vinci Code plotline that had to do with the blood of Christ being a bloodline. So good catch on that, man, because I thought the exact same thing.
Nice. Great minds think alike.
Exactly.
So let's move on from Tolkien and let's get to the
Tolkien.
real... From Tolkien. Yes, thank you. From Tolkien.
Get it right.
Oh, Tolkien.
Yeah.
It's not Tolkien, it's Tolkien. So the big reveal in this episode, and we knew this was coming, but... Snart is back. The return of Captain Cold. Let's just start with that, Patrick. The return of Captain Cold.
I'm so happy it finally happened. Of course, we've been teased all season that he was going to return. We've seen possible flashes of him, whether it's in Rory's mind or not, we weren't sure. But it was good to have him back because I love the character. I love the dynamic between Mick, obviously, with Captain Cold. It's good to have him here.
Yeah, and so we should say he's now a member of the Legion of Doom. There's actually a moment where I want to say Damien Dark. Damien, we get the villains, the Arrow villains confused sometimes. So Damien Dark basically says to Thawne at the vanishing point after the spear has been stolen, we need to take a different approach at this. And that's where I think we first sort of said, oh, this is where we're going to recruit. And so it's interesting that Snart, we still don't know exactly if the Snart that Rory's been seeing was in his head, or if that... You mentioned the idea that maybe they went back in time to place Snart in all those little times to lead up to this moment.
That's still kind of my theory, just because it seems like that Snart really knew he really knew him.
Right.
He really knew Rory, and he knew how to get into his head. So to me, it would make sense, because the Legion of Doom has always thought that the Legends are clearly stupid.
Right.
So to send him back to infiltrate slowly but surely to turn him makes sense to me.
Yeah, and that's still a little unclear to me, and it's still unclear to me exactly which Snart this is. This is clearly a Snart from before Rip recruited the Legends, but it's a Snart that obviously still has that relationship with Mick, and it's a Snart that had become Captain Cold. So it's a post-season 1 Flash. So, but it was really great to see Wentworth Miller back, and I thought it really played with the Rory storyline, of course, as well. Alvin, let's get you in on this. What did you think of Captain Cold's return?
Oh, I'm happy he finally came back. For all the Legends of Tomorrow fans, they've been waiting for the return of Captain Cold for a while now, all throughout season, and we've been teased.
Yeah, we've been teased about this
We've been teased in the Arrowverse shows.
Yep.
We've been teased throughout Mick seeing him in his subconscious mind. But I really do think that was in his subconscious mind, because him and Stein was always playing around mentally in his brain and going in there. And I think it was just a coincidence that, you know, that he was in his mind, and at the same time, now he's back for real. But lo and behold, it worked out to the Legion of Doom favor, because he gave up all the Legends' plans to get the spear rolling.
Right, yeah, so Mick thinks, you know, and basically Stein has convinced Mick that these appearances from Snart are all in his head. So he has no idea that he's betraying the team when he basically tells a figment of his imagination what their plan is. But as it's soon revealed, he is the real Snart, and obviously tells the Legion. Before we get to that, I just wanted to mention one thing, because you had said that the Legion really looks at the Legends as idiots. And Thawne has this great moment where he calls them to Dark legendary idiots, which I thought was such a great... I mean, Thawne's really funny.
Thawne is really funny, and actually one thing I wanted to say, this episode had so many great one-liners. It's one of the best written episodes of the season. There are so many lines that I was pulling out that were quotable. It was just really fun, and I liked seeing Thawne being kind of angry and having these witty one-liners because he feels so bested by them, but he knows he's better. He clearly knows he's better in his head, so I liked that.
Right, yeah, no, and there was great interactions with him and Ray last week, I thought, on the Apollo 13 stuff, so I really liked that a lot. And I know you love the villains.
Oh, of course I do.
So you must have been loving Thawne tonight.
Oh, I was loving Thawne up until, you know, he failed. Their plans failed, like I was saying before.
Right.
And then Damien Dark goes to plan B and gets Captain Cold. And then now everything works out to their favor. So yeah, I was loving all that up, especially when you said, Thawne said, Legends of Idiots. So
legendary idiots. Yeah, exactly.
That was awesome, yeah. So I was really loving this episode up, and now the Legion of Doom is in the upper hand, and...
Well, so let's get to that. So actually what happens is, you know, they basically find the blood of Christ, and now they're in the middle of World War I, and they actually get a ceasefire to take place so that they can get the blood and then use it to destroy the spear. Now, Rory is holding the spear. Amaya actually wants to use the spear to destroy the Legion of Doom and change reality for the better. And of course, Sarah talks her out of that. Mick's holding the spear, and they're going to destroy it. And who shows up but Snart and Dark? And basically, Snart appeals to Mick, and you know, Mick turns on the team, and Mick ends up joining the Legion of Doom. And I think this is a moment that we all anticipated was probably coming. We knew was coming. You and I were talking about in the commercial break when we knew it was going to happen, but it hadn't happened yet. And I think we were thinking that they were going to go the other way. That they were going to make it look too obvious, and that Mick would actually stay on the team, but that's not what happened.
No, and it's kind of funny because my first thought, and you and I both talked about it, was it's way too obvious that Mick is going to go back to the Legion of Doom.
Right.
And he went back to the Legion of Doom because one thing that they really tried to pound home in this episode is that the Legends may never have really trusted Mick, and that they've always thought that he was still a thug inside. And unfortunately, they prove him right by having that confrontation, and they don't trust him. And so he turns his back on them. And that was a really kind of pivotal moment because as someone who's grown so much with those characters, it's something we've talked about all season, something I've very much loved, especially his relationship with Stein.
Yes.
To see it fall that way was very kind of heartbreaking.
Well, and his relationship with Haircut, and
course.
Amaya this season, he's built a relationship with, and Jax to that degree as well. And so, yeah, it was an interesting thing because I've really grown, and I've talked about this. We talk about this every week, but I've grown to love Mick Rory as a character on the show. And in the comic books, I mean, Heatwave is a second, third, fourth tier villain at best. They've really, the writers of the show, of all the Arrowverse shows that Mick has appeared on, and Dominic Purcell deserves a lot of this credit as well,
Dominic
obviously,
does.
for
He's
really
so amazing.
creating a three-dimensional character that's really great on the show and become, in my opinion, one of the best Arrowverse characters there is.
Right.
So for me to see him go back to the dark side, as much as I want him to tag team back with his partner Snart, this isn't our Snart. And I feel like as an audience, we've invested in Mick and we've grown with Mick and we've changed with Mick. So seeing him come back, and maybe this is what the producers and writers want, but I still have some hope that this may be all some undercover master plan of Mick's, although it doesn't seem that way at the end, but that this is some master plan, and we'll see in the next couple of episodes him go back to his Legends friends.
It makes complete sense to me. Bring the realism in there. I mean, think about it. If you and your best friend, right? Your best friend died from like a year ago, and you've been close to him, like a brother.
Yeah.
And I've never seen Mick so emotional in any episodes throughout Legends. Even when Captain Cold first died, I don't even think he was as emotional as he is now. He was
emotional and he's confused and he's frustrated. And he doesn't know what he's feeling, and I think he was being tugged in both directions, as you said.
Right. And Snart took him in from the start.
Yeah.
It's not like the Legends took him in from the start, so he's known him for a while. So it actually makes sense a little bit for his personality to go back there. But he's torn, though. You could see in his eyes how torn he was, whether he should be with the Legends or be back with his best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do in that scenario?
No, absolutely. And I think you make a great point because I think you make a great point when you say that the way the team treated him, the fact that they never really trusted him, even though they said they did. And Mick felt like he was becoming part of that team, but then he realized they really weren't trusting him. And I mean, even at the end of the episode, Ray says, maybe it's our fault. And he's probably the closest, besides Stein on that team, to Mick. And I think he really realizes, and I thought that was a very cool thing that the writers and producers did to maybe it's not as black and white as you're good and you're bad.
No, and Rip actually even, as they're all talking about it on the ship, Rip even says, well, maybe he's not as big of an idiot as we thought. And that kind of says everything that there is to say, is that so many of them wrote him off as someone who was very stupid, but he kind of always knew they didn't trust him. Like, he wanted to believe they did, but you watch time and again where they kind of have to pull him back and go, maybe don't do that. They clearly always thought he was still a thug inside, and he saw through it. And when, of course, we have Snart come back, and Snart looks at him and says, they don't trust you. Why are you going with them? Come back with me. I'm your brother. We've done this together. And what is he going to do? He's going to go back.
Well, and I will say that if the idea is to take the core, these characters back to their core, right? And these are villains, and they never really quite fit in with the heroes.
No.
But that was part of the fun of season 1 of Legends.
Right.
So now, if they're going to take these guys and bring them back to their core of being villains, I'm down with that.
His mind's been everywhere. Look, even when he was Kronos, he turned out all evil against the Legends. And then he came back eventually and turned back around. And
That's a good point. Cronus is a good point.
And I think eventually that's definitely going to happen again. So we'll see.
We'll see. So we want to talk about the final point tonight. The final, oh my God, I can't believe this happened moment. So as we said, the Legion gets the spear at the end. Mick goes over. They have the spear. And the 5 of them together, so we're talking Thawne, Malcolm, Dark, thank you, because I was going to forget it, of course, Cold, and Heatwave. And this is a very Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings moment where they just one over another on the spear, and it all goes white. And it looks like they changed reality. And from the clips that we got of next week, it looks like, at least for the second to last episode of this season, we're going to be dealing with a whole new reality. And what does that mean for the Arrowverse? What does that mean for Arrow? What does that mean for Flash?
Well, it may not mean much of anything because they keep changing time. Everything. They keep changing time. Stop time traveling.
So what reality are we in? What timeline are we in? What's going on? Is that kind of your point?
Yeah, and I love it. It's fun. It's a comic book. It's supposed to be this way. They change so much though, and it's at the point is what is time, because they clearly pulled Snart out of somewhere.
Right.
And we don't know from where.
Right.
And with how much
And
Flash
what
has changed.
ramifications does that have?
Exactly.
And if they pulled the Snart that sacrificed himself at the vanishing point out of the timeline before he sacrificed himself at the vanishing point, I mean, it's the Back to the Future problem. How are these guys here? I'm hoping that we get some of this explained next week.
Yeah, but all I want to say is if you've been watching the Legends of Tomorrow after show right here on the Stream TV, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so that the Legion of Doom was going to get the spear all together. I think I told you guys that. And they did. And I was so happy about it.
No reason to gloat.
Just keep gloating over there.
No reason to gloat.
I'm so happy about that.
Well, no, yeah, you're right, and but I think what's really interesting is going to be to see where it goes next week and how this affects the Arrowverse, if it does at all. I mean, I was at the Paley Fest this weekend where producers and stars of all 4 of the Arrowverse shows were, and they were talking about how the fact that, Barry does one thing wrong. He changes one little thing in time on the Flash, and everyone in the Speed Zone's all upset with him, right? And the Black Flash is after him. The Legends every week are messing everything
Every week,
up.
yeah.
I mean,
Everything.
Is the Arrowverse now a place where you call a smart person, you're a real Einsteins?
Yeah,
instead of an Einstein, right?
And that's exactly what we're getting at. And that's why Legends has become so fun, because the time travel aspect just keeps going, and they keep doing whatever they feel like doing. What are we talking about with how they changed things with George Lucas? Now, obviously, with Tolkien, with whatever they're touching, Apollo 13, they've completely changed history.
Right,
time
now
after
Apollo
time.
13 never had Houston, we have a problem.
Well, it had a different Houston.
It did have a different problem, exactly.
Yeah, and
exactly.
I mean, what? Mick Rory has a statue of himself from the Revolutionary War because they are changing time and just having fun with it, and that's great. That's what this show needs to be.
And that works great for the show.
Absolutely, but what does it mean for the universe?
What does it mean for the Arrowverse?
And
More kids are going to pop up?
Well, and I have to wonder,
right, yeah, who knows?
Is this season finale really going to deal with what they've done? Because they're always talking about these time waves that they're creating and all these problems.
Time waves that they're trying to fix, the aberrations, and all they do is create aberrations all the time.
So something's got to give.
Yeah. They mentioned at Paley Fest, and we were talking about this, I just want to mention for you guys in case you hadn't heard, is that next week's episode will feature a surprise guest role from Katie Cassidy. So we don't know if she's Laurel Lance, the real Laurel Lance, Black Siren of Earth 2. We don't really know what's going on with that. And then they also mentioned, the producers, that there is going to be a mini crossover in the final episode, and also an Easter egg that is more for cartoon fans than comic book fans. That's very interesting, too. Real quick, I want to see what you guys think about that. Alvin, what'd you think? Of all those comments, all those news came out of Paley Fest.
Of course, the whole Laurel Lance thing, it'll be definitely interesting to see that, especially when Sarah has not even met Black Siren yet. Or she doesn't even know anything about Black Siren
That's
yet.
true. I think that might be right.
Ollie hasn't mentioned it to her. Barry Allen hasn't mentioned it to her, so she knows nothing. So, there's going to be a lot of emotions going on there if it is Black Siren.
Interesting. And Patrick?
You know my theory, and it's the theory I'm going to keep going to. Every time we talk about this Constantine, he's got to come back. It's got to be Constantine.
So
I'm waiting for it.
you think he's the secret cameo, the secret Easter egg?
I do.
Oh, and that would make sense, fan of the cartoon. So when I heard fan of the cartoons, not fan of the comic books, I'm thinking, like Super Friends, like one of those Hanna-Barbera characters, the Wonder Twins, Apache Chief, someone like that who's not really from comic book canon. But the cartoon reference could be referencing the upcoming John Constantine cartoon, which takes place in the Arrowverse.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking.
Ooh,
Wow.
That's why we like Patrick
like it.
Campbell. That's why we like having Patrick Campbell around here. Unfortunately, we're just going to have to wait till next week to see what happens. 2 episodes left. We want to make sure that you come right back here next week. Legends of Tomorrow after show right here on the Stream.tv. Before we go, I want to thank my Wave Rider crew, as always, Patrick Campbell.
Thanks a lot, guys. I always love being here. I can't wait to talk about the last couple of episodes. I can't believe we're almost done.
We are almost done with the season.
Yeah, it
it's
is
very sad. And Alvin Rueda.
2 more episodes left. Tweet me at Alvin Rueda or find me on Facebook at The Mighty Chunky. And I can't wait to see you guys for the final 2 episodes. Very exciting. Team Legion of Doom.
Team Legion of Doom. Ooh, Team Legion. I'm on Team Legends. Team Legends.
Team Constantine.
Team Constantine. We want to thank you so much for tuning in and watching our show this week. We love doing it every week, and we hope that you guys love watching it too. We want to remind you to check out our Facebook pages, DC TV Universe Crew, as well as Legends of Tomorrow discussion group. We want to thank our good friend Lance Osfresser, who helps us with those sites. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be here next week for the second to last episode, but I will return in 2 weeks. You're in good hands with Patrick and Alvin. I'll return in 2 weeks to talk about the season finale of Season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow. I'm Jamie Philbrick for TheStream.tv. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.